There is a God they never told you about. Not the God of punishment, not the God of jealousy, not the God who demanded blood sacrifice, who wiped out entire civilizations, who needed to be appeased with ritual, obedience, and the surrender of your own mind. Not that God. The one I'm talking about has no name. It makes no demands. It issues no commandments. It does not punish. It does not reward. It does not even speak, because speech implies separation, and this thing has never been separate from anything. It is the monad, and for nearly 2,000 years, the most powerful religious institution in human history worked systematically, deliberately, to make sure you never found out it existed. This is not a theory. This is not speculation. This is what the texts say. This is what the philosophers confirm. This is what the mystics died protecting. And in the last century, this is what quantum physics has begun to prove, not as metaphor, not as poetry, but as the literal architecture of reality itself. By the end of what I'm about to tell you, you will understand why the suppression was necessary. You will understand why this knowledge was classified as heresy. You will understand why burning libraries was a deliberate strategy and not an accident of history. Because if you know what the monad is, if you genuinely understand it, not intellectually but experientially, you no longer need a priest. You no longer need a mediator. You no longer need an institution standing between you and the source of all consciousness. And institutions do not survive that kind of knowledge spreading freely. Let us begin. In the beginning, there was no beginning. That is the first thing you have to understand about the monad, and it will already feel like the ground shifting beneath you. Every tradition that has glimpsed this reality has struggled to describe it, because description requires language, and language requires distinction, subject and object, self and other, here and there. The monad obliterates all of those categories before they can form. The Gnostic texts that were buried in the Egyptian desert near Nag Hammadi in 1945, hidden for over 1,600 years, describe the monad this way. It is the invisible spirit. It is not a god among gods. It is not the highest being in a hierarchy of beings. It is the infinite ground from which being itself arises. It is pure light without darkness, pure mind without thought, pure consciousness without an object of consciousness. Plotinus, the 3rd century Neoplatonic philosopher who spent his entire intellectual life circling this ineffable center, called it simply the One. He wrote that it cannot be described as thinking, because thinking implies something to think about. It cannot be described as willing, because willing implies a lack. It cannot even be described as existing in the way you and I exist, contingently, partially, temporarily. The One simply is, in a mode of being so complete that the word being barely touches it. This is not mystical vagueness. This is precision. The monad is the singularity before the emanation. It is the silence before the first vibration. Pythagoras understood this, which is why he made the monad the origin of number, not the number 1 in a sequence, but the principle of unity from which all sequence becomes possible. Before 2, before 3, before the entire architecture of mathematical reality, there is the monad. There is the undivided. There is the source. And here is what the tradition says came next. What always comes next when perfection overflows. Emanation, not creation. This distinction is absolutely critical, and it is the hinge on which everything else in this conversation turns. Creation implies a creator who decides, who intends, who fashions something out of nothing by an act of will. The monad does not create. The monad emanates, as a sun emanates light, without choosing to, without depleting itself, without even being aware of what radiates from it. The emanation is natural. It is inevitable. It is an overflow of fullness. From the monad emanates new divine mind, the first principle of cosmic intelligence. From Nu emanates psyche, the world's soul. the animating principle that threads through all of material existence. And from Psyche, further down the chain of emanation, comes the material world. Each level is real, but each is a diminishment of the original light, a translation, a reduction. The way a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy slowly loses resolution with every generation. And somewhere deep inside every human being, according to the Gnostic texts, according to the Hermetic tradition, according to Vedanta, according to Kabbalah's teaching on the Tselem Elohim, the divine image embedded in the soul, somewhere inside you is a spark, a fragment of the original light. A direct, unmediated thread back to the monad itself. This is what they did not want you to know. Now I need to tell you about the other God. Because the Gnostic system does not deny the existence of a creator deity. It does not dismiss the God of the Old Testament as a fiction. It does something far more disturbing than that. It looks at the God of the Old Testament, the one who says, "I am a jealous God," the one who commands genocide, the one who hardens Pharaoh's heart just to make an example of him, the one who demands animal sacrifice and burns cities and drowns the entire world. And it says, yes, that God is real. But that God is not the true God. That God is the Demiurge. The word comes from Plato, Demiurgos, the craftsman, the artisan who shapes matter. In Plato, the Demiurge is relatively benign, working from the blueprint of the eternal forms to construct the physical world. But in the Gnostic schema, the Demiurge is something far more sinister. He is Yaldabaoth, a name that translates roughly as the blind child of chaos. He is Saklas, the fool. He is Samael, the blind god. He is blind because he does not know the monad exists. He looks above himself and sees nothing, because the monad is beyond his perception. And from this blindness comes his supreme, catastrophic arrogance. He looks out at the material realm he has fashioned and declares, "I am God and there is no other God beside me." If you have read the book of Isaiah, that phrase will be familiar to you. It is exactly what Yahweh says. The Gnostic text known as the Secret Book of John, one of the most extraordinary documents ever recovered. A text that purports to record a secret conversation between the resurrected Christ and the Apostle John, identifies Yaldabaoth explicitly with the God of Genesis. It describes him creating humanity not as an act of love, but as an act of containment. He traps the divine spark inside flesh, inside matter, inside a body designed to forget its own origin. He creates a system, law, religion, institutional worship, specifically engineered to keep the soul looking downward, toward him, rather than upward, toward the light from which it came. This is why the serpent in the Garden of Eden, in the Gnostic reading, is not the villain, but the Soma Palasis Sabiat. Serpent is the liberator. You shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. This is not a temptation toward sin. This is an invitation toward gnosis, toward direct knowledge, toward waking up. And the Demiurge panics. He expels them. He curses the ground. He makes existence painful and short and full of labor, because pain and scarcity are excellent mechanisms for keeping consciousness focused on survival rather than transcendence. 2,000 years of institutional religion, the Gnostics argued, has been the Demiurge's management system for the human soul. When the texts from Nag Hammadi were discovered in December of 1945 by a peasant farmer digging for fertilizer near the cliffs of Jabal al-Tarif, scholars immediately understood what they were looking at. These were the Gospels the early church had spent centuries destroying. These were the texts that the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE had deliberately excluded when it codified the biblical canon, not because they were false, but because they were dangerous. Bishop Irenaeus of Lyon, writing in 1880 CE, produced a comprehensive work called Against Heresies, a systematic catalogue and refutation of Gnostic teachings. His objection was not primarily theological, it was organizational. He wrote explicitly that the Gnostic insistence on direct inner experience undermined the authority of bishops. If every individual had direct access to divine truth through inner knowing, the entire episcopal hierarchy became redundant. The priesthood lost its monopoly. Salvation could not be managed, parceled out, withheld, exchanged. He understood the political economy of Gnosis perfectly clearly, and he set about eliminating it. Libraries were burned, teachers were killed, communities were scattered. The Cathars of southern France, who in the 12th and 13th centuries revived many of these Gnostic principles, were subjected to what Pope Innocent III called the Albigensian Crusade, one of the first genocides in recorded European history, ordered specifically to exterminate a spiritual movement that denied the Church's authority to mediate between the soul and God. The Templars, who had spent decades in the Holy Land with access to suppressed Eastern and pre-Christian mystical traditions, were arrested in 1307 on a Friday morning, Friday the 13th, which is why that date carries its ominous charge, tortured into confessions of heresy, and burned. Their libraries vanished. Their networks collapsed. The knowledge went underground. It always goes underground, because the underground is where living roots survive. Let us speak now about what the scientists found when they stopped being afraid of the implication. Max Planck is not a fringe figure. Max Planck is the father of quantum theory. He is the man who discovered that energy is not continuous but discrete, that it comes in irreducible packets, quanta, and that this discovery restructured the entire foundation of physics in the early 20th century. He received the Nobel Prize for it in 1918. This is the man who, in a public address in Florence, said the following: "I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. Derivative from consciousness, not the other way around. Not mind emerging from brain chemistry, not subjective experience arising from sufficiently complex material processes." The monad's position, that consciousness is primary, that matter is its emanation, its reduced expression, its shadow, is the position Planck arrived at through a lifetime of the most rigorous empirical investigation in modern history. Erwin Schrödinger, who gave us the wave equation that governs quantum mechanics, wrote in his book What is Life? That the number of minds in the universe is precisely one, not billions, one. That what feels like individual subjective experience is the one cosmic mind experiencing itself through infinitely varied local perspectives. This is Advaita Vedanta. This is the Upanishadic declaration Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that. This is the Hermetic axiom that the mind of God and the mind of man are one mind differently focused. Werner Heisenberg, who gave us the uncertainty principle, the discovery that the act of observation fundamentally alters what is observed, that the boundary between the observer and the observed is not a fixed line but a participatory membrane, wrote extensively about the relationship between quantum physics and the philosophical frameworks of Pythagoras and Plato. He was not making a casual cultural comparison. He was identifying structural isomorphisms between what ancient mystics described through contemplative direct experience and what physicists were uncovering through laboratory measurement. The observer effect is the quantum confirmation of gnosis. Consciousness is not a passenger in a universe that runs without it. Consciousness is the operating system. And when you understand that, when you feel it rather than simply think it, you understand what the monad is in your own direct experience, not as a distant theological abstraction, not as a hypothesis, as the very awareness that is reading these words right now. The Kabbalah calls it Ein Sof, literally, without end, the limitless, the infinite that precedes all limitation. From Ein Sof radiates the first emanation, Kether, the crown, the first point of self-reflection in the infinite. So subtle it is barely distinguishable from the nothingness from which it emerged. And from Kether, the entire tree of life descends. 10 Sephiroth, 10 stations of divine expression, each a further densification of the original light, until you reach Malkuth, the kingdom, the material world, the furthest point from the source. But here is the teaching that gets suppressed even within Kabbalistic circles. Malkuth contains Ein Sof, The furthest point from God is still made of God. The densest expression of light is still light. The fragment at the bottom of the chain is still connected by an unbroken thread to the source at the top. This is why the Hermetic axiom says as above, so below, not as a decorative metaphor, but as a structural law. The macrocosm and the microcosm mirror each other precisely. What is true of the infinite is true of the infinitely small. The divine pattern propagates across all scales. You are not a being in a universe. You are the universe locally expressed. The Rosicrucians understood this. The Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross, whose manifestos emerged in early 17th century Europe like a controlled detonation in the culture of the Protestant Reformation, was explicitly teaching the union of Hermetic philosophy, Christian mysticism, and what they called natural philosophy, empirical investigation of the divine laws encoded in matter. They were doing quantum physics before they had the vocabulary for it. They were investigating the monad through the instruments available to them, alchemical process, astrological symbolism, and direct contemplative practice. Freemasonry encoded the same curriculum in architectural metaphor. The builder who begins with rough stone and shapes it into a perfect ashlar is not only constructing a building, he is performing the internal operation of refining the soul, burning away the conditioned, fearful, materially bound self, and uncovering the polished, luminous being underneath. The temple they are building is not made of stone, it is made of consciousness, and it has always been made of consciousness. This is the knowledge the initiates were protecting, not because they wanted it for themselves, but because the uninitiated world had demonstrated, repeatedly and violently, what it did to anyone who taught it openly. Now I want to speak about Jesus. Not the Jesus of the Nicene Creed, not the Jesus of the atonement theology that was constructed at Nicaea 3 centuries after his death. The Jesus of the Nag Hammadi texts. The Jesus who says, in the Gospel of Thomas, the kingdom of heaven is spread upon the earth, and men do not see it. The Jesus who says, split a piece of wood, and I am there. Lift up a stone, and you will find me there. This is not a man describing a distant deity who must be approached through institutional channels. This is a man describing the monad, the omnipresent, immanent, inescapable ground of being that underlies every particle, every moment, every breath. When Jesus says in the Gospel of John, I and the Father are one, the orthodox interpretation is that he is declaring a unique, exclusive, unrepeatable metaphysical union available to no one else. But that is not what the Gnostic tradition hears. What the Gnostics hear is a template, a demonstration, a map of what every soul is capable of recognizing within itself. He was not saying, I alone am one with God. He was saying, this is what oneness with God looks like. This is what it means to carry the spark without distortion. This is what it looks like when the monad looks out through human eyes, without the fog of fear, guilt, doctrine, and institutional conditioning obscuring the view. He did not teach a theology. He transmitted a state. And the moment you try to institutionalize a state, you kill it. You mummify it. You replace the living experience with a commentary on the living experience, and then a commentary on the commentary, and then a political structure built on top of that commentary to manage who gets access to what. And within 300 years, the direct experience has been replaced by a bureaucracy. This is what Rome did to Jesus. This is what every empire does to every mystic who gets close enough to the truth to be dangerous. Here is what you need to understand as we move toward the end of this transmission. The monad cannot be found. It can only be recognized. This is the knife-edge distinction that separates gnosis from religion. Religion is a search. It is a movement towards something absent, something external, something you must travel toward, qualify for, submit to intermediaries to access. Gnosis is not a search. Gnosis is a recognition of what has always already been present. You are not trying to reach God. You are trying to stop mistaking yourself for something less than God. This is what the Vedantic teacher means when he says neti neti, not this, not this. It is not an addition of spiritual content. It is a subtraction, a peeling away, a progressive dismantling of every false identification. I am this body. I am this name. I am this story. I am this fear. Until what remains is the one thing that was never absent, never added, never constructed. The divine spark does not need to be kindled. It needs to be uncovered. And this is why it was suppressed. Not because it is difficult, not because it requires extraordinary gifts or lifetimes of study or the approval of any institution, but because it is available to everyone. It is available right now. It cannot be gate-kept because it is already inside the gate. The monad does not require your belief. It does not require your worship. It does not require your obedience. It does not even require your awareness of it to continue being the ground of your existence. It was there before your first thought. It will be there after your last one. It is the awareness in which your thoughts arise, exist briefly, and dissolve. The way waves arise in the ocean, exist briefly, and dissolve. And the wave never stops being the ocean. I want you to sit with something as we close. Right now, before the next thought comes, in the space between where that sentence ended and where your interpretation of it begins, there is something aware, something that registered these words without choosing to, without effort, without construction, something that has been present through every moment of your existence, that has never aged, that has never been sick, that has never been born, and that will never die. That is the monad in you. That is the divine spark the Gnostics spent their lives trying to protect. The mystics of every tradition spent their lives trying to point toward, and the institutions of every age spent their resources trying to obscure. The Nag Hammadi texts were buried to save them. They were buried in a sealed jar in the Egyptian desert, 2 feet beneath the surface of the earth, by someone who understood they were preserving something that had to survive the darkness that was coming. They waited 16 centuries for someone to dig them up. They waited for a moment when the suppression might finally be survivable, when the infrastructure of direct transmission might exist, when the ideas could travel faster than the authorities could move to stop them. That moment is now. The information is no longer locked in library basements and sealed initiatory chambers and private manuscript collections. The quantum physicists are publishing in peer-reviewed journals. The Nag Hammadi texts are translated into dozens of languages. The Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and Vedantic teachings that secret societies guarded for centuries are available to anyone with a search bar and a willingness to look. The suppression relied on scarcity, on controlled access, on the friction between you and the knowledge. That friction is gone, which means the only thing standing between you and the recognition of the monad, the only remaining obstacle, is the conditioning, the inherited belief that you are small, that God is elsewhere, that you require permission, that someone else has authority over your awakening. You do not. You never did. The real God has been waiting, patiently, silently, without judgment, without deadline, inside the awareness you are using to read these words. It has not been searching for you. It has not been angry at your forgetting. It is not impressed by your spiritual achievements or disappointed by your failures. It simply is, and you simply are. And in that shared isness, in that place where the boundary between your consciousness and the infinite consciousness becomes impossible to locate, there is no church, there is no priest, there is no doctrine, there is no hierarchy, there is only the monad, recognizing itself through you. This is what they burned the libraries to prevent you from knowing. Now you know. End of script.